The morning light sliced through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the hardwood floor of our bedroom. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of Clara's breathing beside me. She was still asleep, her chestnut hair fanned out across the pillow, her lips slightly parted. She looked peaceful, almost angelic, in that fleeting moment before the day began. I wanted to reach out, brush my fingers along her cheek, but something held me back. A quiet unease that had been growing for weeks, maybe months. I couldn't pinpoint it, not yet, but it was there like a splinter under the skin. Clara and I had been married for 7 years, together for 10. We'd built a life in this quiet suburban neighborhood, a life that felt solid, predictable. I worked as a project manager for a construction firm, long hours but steady pay. Clara was a graphic designer, freelancing from home most days, her desk cluttered with sketches and coffee mugs. We had a rhythm, a routine. Dinners at the kitchen table, movie nights on the couch, the occasional weekend getaway to the coast. We were happy, or so I thought. But happiness, I was starting to realize, could be a fragile thing, easily mistaken for complacency. The first hint of trouble came about 6 months ago. Clara started staying up later, her laptop glowing in the dark of our living room. She'd say she was working on a big project, some branding campaign for a new client. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She'd always been ambitious, pouring herself into her work. But then there were the phone calls. She'd step outside to take them, her voice low, her laughter muffled through the sliding glass door. When I asked who it was, she'd wave it off. Just a client, she'd say, or Sarah, you know how she rambles. I didn't press. I trusted her. Trust was the foundation of US, or so I'd convinced myself. But the signs kept piling up, small at first, then impossible to ignore. She started dressing differently, sharper, more deliberate. A new perfume, something musky and unfamiliar, lingered in the air. She'd leave the house for errands that took hours, coming back with vague explanations and a distracted smile. Her phone, once left carelessly on the counter, was now glued to her hand, the screen always angled away from me. I'd catch her smiling at it, her thumbs dancing across the keyboard, and when I'd ask what was so funny, she'd shrug and say, just a meme. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that marriage was supposed to have its ebbs and flows, but the doubt gnawed at me, a slow poison seeping into my thoughts. I started paying attention, really paying attention. I noticed the way she'd flinch when I came up behind her, the way she'd quickly lock her phone. I noticed the late-night texts, the ones she'd answer in the bathroom with the door closed. And then there was the night I woke up at 2 a.m. to find her side of the bed empty. I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch, whispering into her phone. When she saw me, she hung up mid-sentence, her face pale. Couldn't sleep, she said, but her voice trembled. I didn't confront her, not then. I wanted to believe there was an explanation, something innocent. But the seed was planted, and it grew with every passing day. I started checking things, small, shameful things. I'd glance at her phone when she left it unattended, though it was always locked. I'd check the mileage on her car, the receipts in her purse. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. The more I looked, the more I found. A coffee shop receipt for 2 lattes when she'd said she was alone. A parking stub from a part of town she had no reason to visit. And then, one evening, I saw it. A notification on her phone, just before the screen went dark. A name, Ethan, followed by a heart emoji. Ethan. The name hit me like a punch. I knew an Ethan, or at least I'd heard the name before. Ethan Caldwell, a photographer Clara had worked with a few times. She'd mentioned him in passing, always casual, always professional. He's got a great eye, she'd said once, showing me his portfolio on her laptop. I'd barely glanced at it, but I remembered his face. Sharp jaw, tousled hair, the kind of effortless charm that made me feel like a lumbering oaf by comparison. Was that who she was texting? Was that who she was whispering to in the dark? I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, my mind racing, piecing together every moment, every clue. The next morning I decided to act. I couldn't keep living in this fog of suspicion. I needed answers, even if they destroyed me. I started small, careful not to tip her off. I checked her laptop when she was in the shower, but her email was clean, her files all work-related. I tried her phone again, guessing passwords, her birthday, our anniversary, our dog's name. Nothing worked. I even called Sarah, Clara's best friend, under the pretense of planning a surprise for Clara's birthday. Has she seemed okay to you? I asked, fishing. Sarah hesitated, just for a second, before saying, yeah, she's fine, just busy. That pause told me more than her words. The turning point came a week later. Clara said she was meeting a client downtown, some rush job that would keep her out late. I nodded, kissed her goodbye, and watched her car pull out of the driveway. Then I followed her. I'd never done anything like it before, and my hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. I stayed a few cars back, my heart pounding, half hoping I was wrong. She didn't go downtown. She drove to a quiet street on the edge of the city, parked outside a sleek apartment building, and disappeared inside. I waited, my stomach churning, for nearly 2 hours. When she came out, she wasn't alone. A man walked her to her car, his hand on the small of her back. Even from a distance, I knew it was him, Ethan. They stood by her car, talking, laughing. Then he leaned in and they kissed. Not a quick peck, but a slow, deliberate kiss, the kind that spoke of familiarity, of promises. I felt something break inside me, a sharp, jagged crack that spread through my chest. I wanted to get out, to confront them, to scream, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, watching my wife with another man, watching my life unravel in real time. When Clara got home that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, said the meeting went well, and started making dinner. I played along, forcing a smile, asking about her day. But inside I was burning. I couldn't look at her without seeing that kiss, without imagining what else had happened in that apartment. I wanted to grab her, shake her, demand the truth, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure, needed to know the full scope of her betrayal before I acted. And so I started planning. Over the next few weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled man named Frank who smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes. I gave him Ethan's name, Clara's schedule, everything I knew. Discreet, I told him. I just need the truth. Frank didn't ask questions. He just nodded and got to work. While I waited for his report, I kept up the charade at home. I was attentive, affectionate, even as every touch felt like a lie. Clara didn't seem to notice. If anything, she was more relaxed, more herself, as if her secret gave her some kind of twisted freedom. Frank's first report came 2 weeks later, delivered in a plain manila envelope. I opened it in my car, away from Clara's eyes. The photos were grainy but unmistakable. Clara and Ethan at a cafe, holding hands across the table. Clara and Ethan walking in a park, her head on his shoulder. Clara and Ethan outside his apartment, their bodies pressed close. There were texts too, intercepted somehow, Frank wouldn't say how. They were intimate, explicit, a window into a relationship that had been going on for months. I can't stop thinking about you, she'd written. You make me feel alive, he'd replied. I read every word, my hands trembling, my vision blurring. The report confirmed what I already knew, but it also gave me something else. Clarity. This wasn't a fling, a moment of weakness. This was a choice, repeated over and over, a deliberate betrayal of everything we'd built. Clara wasn't just unfaithful. She was living a double life, one where I was the fool, the placeholder, the man she came home to after being with him. The pain was unbearable, but it was also fuel. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was going to take control, to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. But I needed to be smart, patient. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about confrontation. It was about precision, about dismantling her world as carefully as she'd dismantled mine. I started gathering more evidence, not just for myself but for what was coming. I installed a tracking app on her phone, hidden in a software update. I recorded her calls when I could, catching snippets of her conversations with Ethan. I even followed her again, this time with a camera, capturing moments she thought were private. Every piece was a brick in the wall I was building, a wall that would trap her when the time was right. I didn't know exactly what form my revenge would take. Not yet, but I knew it would be devastating. She'd hurt me in a way I never thought possible, and I was going to make sure she paid for it, not with tears or apologies, but with something far more permanent. As I sat in my office, staring at the growing file of evidence, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The man I'd been trusting, forgiving, content was gone. In his place was someone new, someone driven by a cold, unyielding purpose. Clara had no idea what was coming. She thought she was safe, that her secret was hers to keep. But I was watching, waiting, and when the moment came, I'd show her what betrayal really felt like. The days bled into weeks, each one a tightrope walk between pretense and obsession. I woke up every morning next to Clara, her presence both a comfort and a wound. She'd smile at me over coffee, ask about my day, and I'd respond with the same hollow warmth, my words carefully measured to keep her unsuspecting. But beneath the surface, I was a man possessed, my every thought bent toward the singular goal of unraveling her life as she'd unraveled mine. The evidence I'd collected, photos, texts, recordings, was a map of her betrayal, but evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed a plan, one that would hit her where it hurt most, one that would leave scars she couldn't hide from. I started by learning everything I could about Ethan Caldwell. Frank, the private investigator, had already given me a file, but I went further, diving into Ethan's world with a predator's focus. He was 29, 4 years younger than Clara, with a loft in Portland's artsy southeast quadrant. His photography business was successful but precarious, built on a reputation for moody, intimate portraits that galleries loved but didn't always pay well. He had a website, a polished Instagram with 12,000 followers, and a public life that screamed confidence. Posts of him at gallery openings, sipping cocktails, always with that half-smile that made my stomach turn. But dig deeper and the cracks appeared. He was in debt. Credit card statements Frank pulled showed late payments, maxed out limits. His apartment lease was month to month, a sign he wasn't as stable as he seemed. And there were whispers, faint but persistent, of a temper, of arguments with clients, of a man who didn't take rejection well. Clara, I realized, wasn't his first affair. Frank found traces of other women, texts, emails, even a restraining order from 3 years ago, filed by a former client who claimed Ethan had stalked her after their relationship ended. It was dropped, but it told me something crucial. Ethan was reckless, a man who thrived on control but unraveled when he lost it. This was my leverage, the weak point I could exploit. If I could turn Ethan against Clara, or better yet, make him destroy himself, I could watch her world collapse without ever lifting a finger. But Clara was the real target. I needed to understand her, to see the woman she'd become behind my back. I started paying closer attention, not just to her lies but to her vulnerabilities. She was proud, fiercely so, her identity tied to her work, her creativity, her carefully curated image as a free-spirited artist. She hated being seen as weak, as ordinary. Her affair with Ethan, I realized, wasn't just about attraction. It was about escape, about becoming someone else, someone unbound by the routine of our life. That was her weakness, her need to be extraordinary, to be seen as more than just a wife, a partner, a woman tethered to a mortgage and a man like me. If I could strip that away, expose her as something lesser, something flawed, it would hurt her more than any confrontation. The plan took shape slowly, piece by piece, as I sifted through my options. I couldn't just confront her. That would be too easy, too fleeting. A divorce would free her, let her run to Ethan without consequence. No, I needed something permanent, something that would follow her, haunt her, make her feel the weight of her choices every day. I needed to dismantle her life, her career, her reputation, her sense of self, while keeping my hands clean. And I needed Ethan to be the instrument, the spark that set it all ablaze. The first step was to plant seeds of doubt. I started small, subtle. I created a fake email account, posing as an anonymous friend who'd seen Clara and Ethan together. I sent Ethan a message, vague but pointed. "She's not who you think she is. Ask her about her husband." I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one, but I knew it would rattle him. A man like Ethan, possessive and insecure beneath his charm, wouldn't let it go. I waited, watching for signs. A week later, Clara came home tense, her jaw tight, her phone silent. She snapped at me over dinner, something about a stressful day, but I saw it for what it was. Ethan was asking questions, and she was feeling the pressure. Next, I turned to Clara's world. Her freelance work depended on a small circle of clients, most of whom knew her through a local design collective. Reputation was everything in that crowd. Trust, professionalism, authenticity. I started digging into her projects, cross-referencing her invoices with her emails. I found discrepancies, jobs she'd billed for but never delivered, others she'd outsourced to cheaper designers while charging full rates. It wasn't fraud, not exactly, but it was sloppy, unethical, the kind of thing that could ruin her if it came to light. I created another anonymous account, this time on a design forum she frequented, and posted a vague warning about unreliable freelancers in her niche, dropping just enough details to make her nervous. I didn't name her. Not yet. But I knew she'd see it. Knew it would make her wonder who was watching. The real breakthrough came when I got into Ethan's email. I'd hired a hacker through Frank, a kid who worked for cash and didn't ask questions. Took him 3 days to crack Ethan's password, and what I found was a goldmine. Emails between him and Clara, hundreds of them, stretching back 8 months. They were raw, unguarded, a window into their affair. She wrote about me, calling me predictable, stifling, a man who didn't see her anymore. Ethan fed her ego, telling her she was too vibrant for me, that she deserved a life that matched her soul. It made me sick, but it also gave me power. I saved everything, every word, every photo they'd shared. Some were intimate, others mundane, but all of them were ammunition. I used the emails to tighten the noose. I sent Clara a single photo from Ethan's account, one she'd sent him, a selfie, her in his bed, smiling. I attached it to an email from a burner account, with no message, just a subject line, "Does he know?" I watched her that night, saw the color drain from her face when she checked her phone. She excused herself to the bathroom, stayed there for 20 minutes. When she came out, her eyes were red, her voice brittle. "I'm tired," she said, and went to bed early. I knew she was spiraling, wondering who knew, how much they knew. I didn't stop there. I sent Ethan another message, this time with a screenshot of Clara's email to a client, one where she complained about Ethan's needy texts. "She's playing you," I wrote. "Look closer." The cracks were spreading. Clara W.'s distracted, jumpy, her laughter forced. Ethan's texts to her slowed, then stopped. I could see it through the tracking app I'd installed. They were fighting, or at least pulling away, each one doubting the other. But I wasn't done. I needed to escalate, to push them both to the edge. I started feeding Ethan's insecurities, using his own email to send himself messages from Clara that she hadn't written, petty, cutting things like, "You're too clingy," or "I need space." I did the same to her, forging messages from Ethan that called her dishonest, unstable. They were small lies, but they fed the paranoia I'd already sown. Then I went for Clara's career. I leaked the discrepancies I'd found to one of her biggest clients, posing as a concerned colleague. I didn't name her directly, just sent enough details to prompt an audit. Within days, she got a call, then another. She spent hours on the phone, her voice rising, her excuses thin. "It's a misunderstanding," she told me, but her hands shook as she poured her wine. The collective was talking, whispers of unprofessional and untrustworthy starting to spread. I saw it on the forum, saw her name mentioned in a thread about freelancers to avoid. She didn't know it was me, couldn't know, but the guilt was eating her alive. The final piece was Ethan's downfall. I knew he was volatile, knew he'd lash out if pushed far enough. I sent him one last email, this time from Clara's account, a brutal message saying she was done, that he was a mistake, that she'd never loved him. I timed it for when I knew he'd be drinking, late on a Friday after a gallery show. I didn't see his reaction, but I didn't need to. The next day, Clara came home in tears, her phone buzzing with missed calls. "He's lost it," she said. Not to me but to Sarah on the phone. "He's threatening to tell everyone." I pretended to be concerned, asked if she was okay. But inside I was cold, calculating. Ethan was doing exactly what I wanted, imploding and taking her with him. By now, my plan was a machine, each part feeding the next. Clara's career was teetering, her affair unraveling, her confidence shot. Ethan was a ticking bomb, his ego bruised, his temper fraying. I had one more move, one final twist to make sure neither of them walked away unscathed. I started drafting a public post, one that would expose their affair. Not to me, not to our friends, but to the world they both cared about. Clara's clients, Ethan's followers, the tight-knit creative scene they both relied on. I'd use their own words, their emails, their photos, and I'd make it look like Ethan had leaked it in a fit of rage. It would ruin her reputation, tank his career, and leave them both pointing fingers at each other. As I worked, I felt no joy, no satisfaction. This wasn't about feeling good. It was about justice, about making them pay for the life they'd stolen from me. Clara was still my wife, still the woman I'd loved. But that love was a ghost, a shadow I couldn't touch. Every night, I'd lie next to her, listening to her breathe, knowing I was orchestrating her downfall. And every morning, I'd wake up, put on my mask, and wait for the moment to strike. The air in our house felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that clung to every corner. Clara moved through our days like a ghost, her eyes distant, her smile a brittle mask. She thought I didn't notice the way her hands trembled when her phone buzzed, or how she'd flinch at the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. She was unraveling, caught in the web I'd spun, and I watched it all with a cold detachment that scared me. The man I'd been, patient, trusting, hopeful, was gone, replaced by someone who lived for the moment when her world would collapse. That moment was coming, and I was ready to light the fuse. The plan was in its final stages. I'd spent weeks building the trap, piece by careful piece, and now it was time to spring it. The public post I'd drafted was ready, a devastating expose of Clara and Ethan's affair, written in Ethan's voice, using their own words against them. I'd compiled their emails, their texts, even a few of the intimate photos they'd shared, all carefully edited to look like a bitter, impulsive leak from a scorned lover. It would go live on a popular design forum, one frequented by Clara's clients and Ethan's peers, with links sent anonymously to their key contacts, her biggest clients, his gallery connections, even local journalists who covered the art scene. The fallout would be catastrophic. Clara's reputation as a professional would be shredded, Ethan's career would implode, and their affair would be laid bare for everyone to see. Best of all, they'd blame each other, their trust already eroded by the lies I'd planted. But I wasn't content to stop there. A public shaming, while brutal, was too fleeting. I needed something deeper, something that would follow Clara long after the gossip died down. I started looking into her finances, her contracts, her professional network. Clara had always been meticulous about her work, but her affair had made her sloppy. I found more than just the discrepancies I'd leaked to her client. There were unpaid taxes, a side hustle she hadn't reported, even a small loan she'd taken from a friend and never repaid. I didn't plan to use it all, not yet, but I filed it away, an arsenal of truths I could wield if she tried to rebuild. I wanted her to feel trapped, to know that every step she took toward recovery could lead to another fall. Ethan was easier to target. His life was a house of cards, built on charm and borrowed time. I'd already pushed him to the edge with the forged messages, and Frank's reports confirmed he was spiraling. Drinking heavily, arguing with gallery owners, even missing shoots. I decided to give him one final shove. Using another burner account, I tipped off his landlord about his late rent payments, attaching a screenshot of his bank statement I'd gotten from the hacker. I also sent an anonymous complaint to the city about his loft, claiming it was being used for unauthorized commercial activity. It was petty, but it would cost him time, money, and stability, things he couldn't afford to lose. If he cracked under the pressure, he'd lash out at Clara, and that was exactly what I wanted. The night before I planned to post, I sat in my office, staring at the screen. The file was ready, the email addresses queued, the forum post scheduled for 8 a.m. I'd set it up to look like Ethan had snapped, drunk and vengeful, spilling their secrets in a fit of rage. I'd even hacked his Instagram to post a cryptic, bitter caption. Some people aren't worth the lies, to sell the story. Everything was perfect, down to the smallest detail. But as I sat there, my finger hovering over the send button, something twisted inside me. Not doubt, not guilt, but a hunger for more. This wasn't enough. I wanted Clara to see it coming, to feel the ground shift beneath her before it swallowed her whole. I decided to confront her, not with the full truth, but with just enough to make her squirm. That night, over dinner, I set the stage. She was picking at her pasta, her phone face down on the table, when I leaned back and said, "You seem stressed lately. Everything okay with work?" My tone was casual, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, the way her fork paused midair. "It's fine," she said too quickly. "Just a lot of deadlines." I nodded, letting the silence stretch, then said, "What about Ethan? You haven't mentioned him in a while." Her face went pale, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. "Ethan?" she finally said, her voice thin. "Why would I mention him?" I shrugged, keeping my eyes on hers. "Just curious. You used to talk about his work. Thought you might have seen him recently." The air between us crackled, her panic almost tangible. She mumbled something about not working with him anymore, then changed the subject, her words tumbling over each other. I didn't push further. I didn't need to. She knew I knew something, and that was enough to keep her awake that night, wondering how much I'd uncovered. The next morning, I woke early, my pulse steady. Clara was still asleep, her face drawn even in rest. I slipped out of bed, went to my office, and hit send. The post went live at 8:03 a.m., a digital bomb detonating in the quiet of the internet. I watched the forum light up, comments piling up within minutes. Shock, outrage, curiosity. Is this real? Who's the designer? Ethan Caldwell's such a creep. By 9 a.m., the links I'd sent had done their work. Clara's biggest client emailed her, canceling a project. A gallery dropped Ethan from an upcoming show. Twitter X now was buzzing, screenshots of the post spreading like wildfire. I sat back, my coffee untouched, and waited for the fallout to reach our house. Clara woke late, her phone already vibrating with notifications. I was in the kitchen when she stumbled in, her eyes wild, her hair a mess. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "My clients, they're freaking out. There's this post." She stopped, staring at her screen, her breath hitching. I played dumb, asking what was wrong, but she didn't answer. She sank into a chair, scrolling, her face crumpling as the reality hit. "It's him," she whispered, not to me but to herself. "He did this." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She was already falling apart, her world cracking under the weight of her own choices. By noon, Ethan was calling her, his voicemails a mix of anger and desperation. "How could you let this happen?" he shouted in one. "You told me you'd handle it." Clara didn't answer, just deleted the messages, her hands shaking. She tried calling Sarah, but Sarah was cold, distant. Word had reached her, too. The collective was circling, their trust in Clara eroding. She spent the day on damage control, sending emails, making calls, but it was like trying to catch water in her hands. The truth was out, and no amount of spin could undo it. That evening, she confronted me. She came into my office, her eyes red, her voice raw. "Did you see it?" she asked. "The post about me?" I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "It's awful," I said. "Who would do something like that?" She stared at me, searching for a crack, a sign that I knew more. "It's Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "He's trying to ruin me." I tilted my head, feigning concern. "Why would he do that, Clara? What's going on between you two?" She froze, her mouth opening, then closing. "Nothing," she said finally, but it was weak, unconvincing. She turned and left, the door clicking shut behind her. Over the next week, the fallout deepened. Clara lost 2 more clients, her name blacklisted in the collective. Ethan's career tanked, galleries cut ties, his Instagram followers plummeted. He sent Clara a final text, one I read through the tracking app. "You destroyed me. Hope it was worth it." She didn't reply, but I saw her cry, silent tears as she sat alone in the dark. I felt no pity, only a grim satisfaction. This was what I'd wanted. Her life in ruins, her lover gone, her confidence shattered. But there was one last piece, one final twist to make sure she'd never forget. I waited until she was at her lowest, a month later, when the dust had settled but the wounds were still raw. She was trying to rebuild, taking small jobs, avoiding the collective. One night, over dinner, I slid an envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary. "Open it," I said. Inside were printouts, her emails to Ethan, the photos, the texts. Her face went ashen as she flipped through them, her hands shaking. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. I leaned back, my voice calm but cold. "I've known for months, Clara. I know everything." She started to cry, apologies spilling out, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said. "You made your choice. Now you live with it." I told her I wasn't divorcing her. Not yet. I wanted her to stay, to face me every day, to know I held the power to ruin her again if I chose. "One more lie," I said. "And this goes to every client you have left, every friend, your family. You'll have nothing." She nodded, tears streaming, too broken to fight. I didn't post the rest. I didn't need to. Clara was mine now, not out of love, but fear. She tiptoed around me, her spirit crushed, her eyes always searching for the next blow. Ethan disappeared, his loft foreclosed, his name a cautionary tale. I went back to my life, my work, my routine, but I was changed. The revenge was complete, but it hadn't healed me. It had only made me harder, sharper. A man who'd learned that trust was a trap, and that pain could be a weapon. Clara would never betray me again, but she'd never be my wife again either. And maybe, in the end, that was the cruelest revenge of all.